There is a photograph taken in a Las Vegas conference room in August of 2022, and in it, a John Deere display terminal sits on a folding table with its housing off and its circuit board bare. The man standing behind that table had bought the display on eBay with his own money, about $7,000, for a screen the rest of us only ever see through a windshield. I spent 11 years as a John Deere dealer technician in the 1990s, and I have plugged the service laptop into that same terminal in a shop bay in Iowa. Then, a stranger in a hotel ballroom 2,000 miles from the nearest cornfield got past the lock I was once paid to hold, and he did it with a soldering iron and a bench supply. What came off that circuit board is the part Deere has never answered straight: the numbers. The man goes by SIC codes. The event was the security conference called Defcon, held in Las Vegas that same August. The displays he opened were the John Deere 2630 and the 4240, the two screens that sit in a great many cabs across the Corn Belt. He desoldered the flash memory off the board roughly 15 times before the thing gave in. He says he could do it now in about an hour. And to prove he owned the machine, he ran the 1990s video game Doom on a John Deere tractor screen, modified so the player drives a combine through a field. Let me say one thing, and then I will not bring it up again. Everything I learned behind that dealer counter about that lock is in a manual called the Equipment Freedom Manual. It is at getacreon.com, linked in the description and the pinned comment. If you want it, it is there. That is all. What actually changed? Understand what that display is. It is not a radio. On a modern John Deere, it is the gate. Fault codes, calibrations, injector trims, transmission programming, the emissions reset after a shutdown, all of it runs through that screen, and the screen wants to know whether the laptop talking to it belongs to an authorized dealer. I sat on the dealer side of that gate for 11 years. I know what the parts counter marks a sensor up to, and I know why, and none of the why has anything to do with the sensor. I watched the shop rate climb and the wait times climb with it, and I watched grown men stand in the parts department in Cedar Rapids holding a component they could install blindfolded, waiting on a technician whose only real function was to type a code into a laptop and drive away. The billable hour was the product. The green paint was the delivery system. We did not take that quietly. Back in March of 2017, reporters at Motherboard documented American farmers buying cracked John Deere firmware out of Eastern Europe. Most of it worked over in Poland and Ukraine and sold back into the States through invite-only forums. Getting into one of those forums meant buying a $25 dummy diagnostic part from a third-party site, and instead of the part, you got the code to join. That is what it had come to. Iowa and Nebraska operators, in the middle of harvest, buying a bootleg file from a stranger overseas so a machine they had paid for outright would run again. What it actually unlocks. This gets reported loose, and the details matter. The John Deere display runs Wind River Linux, a real operating system with a long history in industrial and military hardware. SIC codes got root on it. Root means the top account, the one that answers to nothing above it. With that, he bypassed the dealer authentication check entirely, and he restored the terminal to factory settings without a single call to a John Deere dealership. He did not steal a password. He took the board apart and went underneath the password. And the reason it matters to us is that the jailbreak was never the only door. There is a 9-pin diagnostic port inside the cab of nearly every machine we own. A Spanish outfit called Kohali sells a tool called Jaltest, and it plugs straight into that port. Jaltest covers something on the order of 130 equipment brands: John Deere and Case and Claas and New Holland and the Fendt tractors sold under AGCO, all from one laptop. It reads codes, clears codes, graphs live data, and programs control units on a long list of systems. It is sold openly in the United States through outfits like Abilene Machine in Kansas, and an Italian firm called Texa sells a rival kit into the same 9-pin port. There is no forum invitation involved and no soldering iron. A man with a ruggedized laptop in a shed outside Grand Island can force a stationary regeneration on a plugged filter without ever raising a dealership on the phone. Deere's own reaction to the Las Vegas demonstration is worth hearing because it was not a threat. The company told Wired that it works closely with cybersecurity partners and that it embraces the broader ethical hacking community. Read that twice. A corporation that had spent a decade arguing the operator could not be trusted with the software chose, when a stranger got root on its display in public, to compliment the stranger. Then the law moved. On the 25th of October 2024, the Librarian of Congress signed the final rule in the Copyright Office proceeding that governs this, and effective 3 days later, it became lawful for the owner of an agricultural vehicle to get past the access controls guarding that machine's own diagnostic and telematics data. That exemption runs to the 28th of October 2027. Subscribe if you believe the man who signs the check for a combine should be allowed to know what it is telling him, what it costs us. Think about what the lock actually charged on the ground. A dealer service call in the middle of soybean harvest is not a line item, it is a weather window. Rain is coming Thursday. The technician gets there Friday. The beans that were standing at 14% moisture on Wednesday are a different crop by Saturday. And no invoice anywhere records that loss, because the loss lands entirely on the operator and never touches the dealership. Public Interest Research Group put a number on the whole picture in April of 2023, and it comes to $4.2 billion a year across United States agriculture, $3 billion of it in downtime alone, and $1.2 billion in excess repair cost. That is not a rounding error. That is a second mortgage spread thin across a lot of section lines in Illinois and Kansas and South Dakota. We are not the first industry this happened to. Apple spent years arguing that an independent shop replacing an iPhone screen was a safety problem, right up until the courts and the legislatures and its own customers made that position expensive to hold. And then Apple opened a self-service repair program and called it a service to the consumer. The pattern does not change. The lock is defended as safety and engineering integrity for as long as it can be defended, and it is quietly opened once the cost of defending it passes the revenue it protects. Deere sold us autonomy and precision agriculture at the Louisville Farm Show, and the dealer lock came in behind it in the same crate. The honest part. I am going to name what my own title overstates, because you will hear it in the comments otherwise, and you would be right. Deere has stopped some of this. After SIC codes disclosed the specific weaknesses he found, Deere patched them, which closed those exact doors on newer software. So it is fairer to say Deere cannot stop the movement than to say Deere cannot stop the jailbreak. The other honest piece is that what happened in that Las Vegas ballroom is not a farm tool. 15 attempts at desoldering a flash chip is not a thing you do between loads. And Deere's stated objection is not entirely hollow. The company says it will not support customers modifying embedded software because of equipment safety, emissions compliance, and aftermarket uncertainty. On emissions specifically, a cracked file from an overseas forum can absolutely put a machine out of compliance, and that risk lands on the operator, not on the man who sold him the file. What that Las Vegas demonstration really did was settle an argument. For years, the position out of Moline was that the software lock existed because a modern combine was too complex and too dangerous to be touched by the man who owns it. Then, a stranger with a $7,000 eBay display and a soldering iron got root on it in a hotel ballroom, and the argument stopped being about capability. It was about who is permitted. Those are different claims, and only one of them was ever true. Every farmer who ever stood in a dealership in Grundy Center being told he was not qualified to reset his own machine had that suspicion confirmed on a folding table in Las Vegas. We were never the problem. We were the market. Subscribe if you stand with the operators who kept their machines running when the dealer network would not.